Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
On this week's program, we'll get a close-up look at the just opened state capitol, including its new public spaces and beautifully restored artwork. We'll also show you highlights from the opening of the 2017 legislative session. Stay tuned for this and more on this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. On Tuesday, January 3rd, the legislature convened the 2017 session in the newly renovated state capitol. Precisely at noon, Secretary of State Steve Simon gavelled in the House of Representatives.
The hour of 12 o'clock having arrived, and in obedience to the laws of the state of Minnesota, it becomes my duty as your Secretary of State to call the members of the Minnesota House of Representatives to order.
Opening Day is a ceremonial event attended by families and friends of lawmakers. The November election resulted in 23 new members elected to the House of Representatives and 21 new senators. The primary business of the day consisted of members taking the oath of office and officially electing leaders and parliamentary staff. Here are some highlights from this historic day.
It has been the honor of my life to serve as Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives for the last 2 years. I'm humbled to be elected Speaker again and to provide steady leadership in this chamber throughout the next biennium. Today is an historic day for Minnesota for many reasons. Legislators sworn in today are the result of significant decisions by Minnesotans. Voters chose a government shared between a House Republican majority, a Senate Republican majority, and a Democrat chief executive. Instead of single-party control, Minnesotans opted for balance, for common sense, and ultimately for compromise. Perhaps most historic, though, is the fact that on this very day, in 1905, members of the Minnesota House used this chamber for the very first time. Exactly 112 years ago today, the 34th legislative session was convened in the newly constructed Minnesota State Capitol. Today we are convening the 90th legislative session in a newly restored Capitol. This building looks better today than it has at any time since 1905. Give it a round of applause. Minnesotans also made history by electing 48 women, the largest number of women leaders ever to serve in the Minnesota House of Representatives.
You know, this morning as I was driving up to the Capitol, members, I came from the south side, and oftentimes when I do that, I pinch myself that I get to work here. It's a tremendous privilege that your constituents have given you an opportunity to serve in the state Senate. So enjoy today. 67 names up on the board. Tell you what a privileged list it is. There have only been, since statehood, 1,367 Minnesotans. 1,367 people in our state have been given the privilege to sit in this chamber and represent their constituents.
Where we don't have to be partisan, we should not be partisan. There are plenty of places we have to be partisan, but when we have an idea that's good for Minnesota, we should figure out how to do it. And so that's my commitment to all of you. This is an incredible privilege that we all have. And it's the word I've been thinking about today is opportunity. This is an opportunity. And the election, you know, yes, it was somewhat about Republican, Democrat, but it was, I think, more about people just want their government to work. I think they want us to do our job well and honorable and actually accomplish some of the things. And there's some big issues that we all have been talking about that let's get it done. I mean, I really feel like we can do that if where we're not partisan, we shouldn't be for the good of Minnesota. We are an amazing institution. Senator Bach, you yourself continued to make it an amazing institution. And I think about this Capitol that we have walked into, it's amazing. And it could have been shortchanged, and you did not. And we may have done it different, but you did it well. And I want you to know I appreciate that. I think Minnesota appreciates you, and 100 years from now, people are going to look back and say, you know, what a treasure. And so I don't want that to be unsaid.
Also on opening day, Governor Dayton pressured lawmakers to provide immediate financial relief to Minnesotans facing skyrocketing health insurance premiums.
Over 2 months ago, I proposed healthcare premium relief for Minnesotans who don't qualify for the federal credits under the Affordable Care Act. And unfortunately, we were not able to reach an agreement to proceed thereafter. So I'm calling on the legislature to this week pass the bill that I proposed before, which I'm very grateful to Representative Liebling and Senator Loehrke for sponsoring, that would provide this relief to about 125,000 Minnesotans who otherwise are not receiving any assistance with the premium increases that they've received for this year. Is time urgent because the open enrollment period ends January 31st, and Minnesotans are still making decisions about what level of health care coverage they can afford.
On Thursday, Republicans responded by unveiling the 2017 Health Care Emergency Aid and Access Act.
More importantly, we want to talk about what it means to have Republicans in control of the legislature. We're going to move very quickly on legislation to help Minnesotans out. What we learned in the last election is that the #1 issue that Minnesotans care about right now is the health insurance crisis that Minnesotans are facing. So we're going to talk today about the first part of that solution, which is going to be putting some help in the hands of Minnesotans, and also some small reforms helping them with access and other things. And our chairs will talk about that. But we're going to move fairly quickly to get this bill passed and on the governor's desk and this help in the hands of Minnesotans.
To tell you that the House and Senate are on the same page. We may not move at the exact same pace, but we know that this is very important for Minnesota, that we give some emergency aid right now. And we really want to get some reforms going right now as well. But like the Speaker said, we want to make sure that the people that are in charge of this in our committees are really speaking to you and letting Minnesota what we want to do.
And this is a big deal that we are moving forward. We're starting to unwind some of what has been done to the state of Minnesota through the passage of the ACA and the full implementation of the ACA here in Minnesota. This is the beginning. There is much work to do. We are going to move expeditiously, but we're going to have a transparent process so that those who are impacted can engage at the legislature as they should. The House is going to move a little bit faster. We're going to have some committee hearings next week so that those who are impacted by this legislation get an opportunity to come forward. And then when we go to conference committee, all the ideas will come together. We'll pass this in a timely manner and get it to the governor. We are offering premium relief. We are helping those people who have acute health care conditions to have access, to continue to have access to their doctors. And we're doing some reforms that send a signal to employers and small businesses that they are going to have options in the new year so that they can help take care of their employees. Small business owners want to help their employees buy health insurance, and it has been cost prohibitive, and there are some reforms in this bill that are going to help that happen. We have some provisions in here for surprise billing. So as consumers are faced with healthcare choices and narrow networks, at least they won't be surprised by accessing a provider who might not be in network.
The Minnesota State Capitol opened this week following a 3-year renovation project. I had the opportunity to talk with 2 key state officials who were directly involved in the restoration efforts. From the basement to the top of the dome, the structure has been refurbished to its original grandeur, originally conceived by architect Cass Gilbert. From restoration work in the beautiful chambers to the detailed refurbishing of the building's artwork and murals, from foundation reinforcement to the repairing of the Capitol dome, and from the complete remodeling of offices and rooms to the discovery of long-covered skylights, the Minnesota State Capitol will be an amazingly modern building while showcasing its Renaissance beauty. The multi-purpose restoration project took several years to complete, and it had the goal of making the building safer, healthier, and easier to occupy. We recently talked with the Department of Administration Commissioner Matt Massman, who oversaw the project.
Well, Shannon, the overall goals that guided the entire restoration were architectural integrity, life safety, and functionality. The work that was done here in room 123 is particularly indicative of the work to improve the functionality of the building.
Functionality, such as installing committee tables that allow senators to converse with each other face to face, a vestibule leading into the committee rooms so hearings are not interrupted, monitors for the public and audience to view presentations, and hearing assist technology to monitor the hearings. Some of the committee room locations have changed as well, with 2 new Senate committee rooms being located on the ground floor of the Capitol. Separate Senate and House committee rooms will be located in the east wing of the building.
For people who have been to the Capitol quite a bit, the layout of the Capitol will have changed somewhat. So I think over time that might shift the way the Capitol is used and shift the way traffic and people flow through the building as well.
In particular, former committee rooms 107 and 112 will serve as caucus rooms for House members, with stairways leading to the rooms from the House chamber. And there will be better accommodations for the people organizing tours of the building.
The Historical Society will have a space on the ground floor that is a classroom space, particularly for students who visit the Capitol in order to learn about the Capitol while they're here.
One of the biggest changes in the state Capitol renovation is the basement. In fact, it doesn't even look like a basement, does it?
That is a really good point. No, it doesn't look like a basement, or I hope it doesn't look like a basement anymore after the restoration. There will be, again, a number of things happen to the basement, but one of the key changes to the basement is reflective of the life safety improvements that have been done to the building. One of the key reasons why we pursued the restoration in the first place was to upgrade to modern technology and modern mechanical systems.
Commissioner Massman believes people will be impressed with the most visual change to the basement, a new space called the Kasota Room, which will be directly under the rotunda and serve as an area for people to gather.
There will also be substantial new public space in the Rathscaler area. So the dining space of the Capitol, of course, will still be the Rathscaler, but the space itself will be larger and accommodate more people.
I know the Capitol Press Corps is excited to be returning to the Capitol. How have their needs been accommodated?
Transparency and open government depends on access to the media, and so that is a really key feature of the work that's done in the basement also. Prior to restoration, the media was in the basement, but not really in facilities that were intended to accommodate media. So the key way to think about the new media space, I think, is that for the first time there will be space in the media, space in the Capitol that's actually designed for media.
From a dedicated press room to local video feeds, to natural light in some of the press offices, the media space will be very different than their previously cramped quarters. Not only the media will be better served in the renovated Capitol, but the public as well, with new spaces, mainly on the 3rd floor, where the Senate offices were once located.
We're all familiar with Days on the Hill, which oftentimes brings very large groups of people, public, citizens to the Capitol to witness and be part of the democratic process. And a lot of times they had been accommodated just in corridors and in spaces that weren't really designed for that. Now with the new Capitol restoration, we'll have public space that they'll be able to kind of set up camp during the day, host either gatherings or meetings for the activities that they have there for their day on the Hill.
From improved stairways and bathrooms to better lit hallways and reorganized vending areas, the Capitol is being updated while still respecting Cass Gilbert's vision. I couldn't help but notice when I entered the building that the elevators have glass doors.
The elevators actually originally had glass doors. That's the way Cass Gilbert designed the building. That was his vision. So while those of us who have been, that are alive today and have been in the Capitol have never seen the glass doors in the elevator, but Cass Gilbert's original vision was to allow much more natural light to pour into the building, as well as for those in the building to be able to be better connected with the grounds around the Capitol. Well, we didn't have any photos to guide the restoration of what the original doors looked like. As part of the effort to restore the architectural integrity of the building, a key piece of the elevator restoration has been to restore those glass doors that allow light to pour in from the elevator shafts into the building on all of the floors. It's going to be a really neat feature that I think people will be really impressed by.
During the state capitol renovation, money was appropriated for the restoration of the artwork. How is that project going?
Well, this is going to be one of the most amazing parts of the project for people when they walk into the Capitol for the first time. Again, as someone who has spent a fair amount of time working in the Capitol, much of the artwork almost was not something that caught your attention because it had been, either there was grime that had accumulated or tarnish, or the artwork had become dull. So as part of the restoration, really all of the murals in the state capitol and much of the decorative painting in the hallways and the hallways and the corridors has all been restored.
Brian Pease of the Minnesota Historical Society talked about some of the restoration work done to enhance the state capitol's artwork. Brian, before the restoration work began at the state capitol, the murals were really dingy.
Yeah, that's correct. The art has really been one of the spectacular results of this project, was the art conservation work. And before then, when people would walk in the building, what we were seeing were paintings that were probably with 50 or 60-year-old varnish, so that had really darkened. You had dust, and even before they were refinished, before the last refinishing with the varnish, there was smoke. People were smoking in the building. So what we were seeing in those artworks throughout the building were not exactly what they would have appeared like in 1905. So everything was much darker.
The brightening of the murals and wall panels helped showcase Cass Gilbert's original intent and design.
I think that's one thing the public will really be amazed at. They'll see a brighter building because of the lighter colors as they would have appeared in 1905. A good case in point is when you walk in the rotunda, there's an inner walkway by the battle flags. And for as long as I've been here, that was painted tan to match the other surrounding walls. And historically in 1905, that was a dark blue ceiling, and that's been restored and brought back.
The restoration project yielded some surprises.
I guess what I was surprised at is how much of all the paintings, all the murals were painted over or overpainted. That means that in the 30s, they were hiring artists during the Depression to give them an employment. And so they painted over, the compositions are the same, but they painted over colors or added drapery to the figures or added a bush here or there. And so when the conservators came back and said, well, this is like 95% overpainted, that's a concern, because how do you remove that paint, or where do you go with going back to the original? And so there was a lot of effort. The decision was, let's go back as much as we can to what these paintings would have looked like.
The Civil War paintings displayed in the governor's reception room and anteroom were controversial, but will be returned to their original locations. 2 other paintings from the reception room will be relocated to another site in the building.
Then there are the 2 historic scenes of Father Hennepin and the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux that were determined to be moved out of that space but still kept in the Capitol. And so they'll be displayed in another room in the Capitol, and we'll have a lot more robust interpretation, hopefully some interpretive kiosks that people can hear both sides of the story of why some of the artwork is controversial, the historic accuracy or inaccuracy as portrayed by some people.
During the renovation, workers found skylights previously hidden from view.
Skylights were an important feature of the original architecture. The building was wired with electricity when it was constructed from 1896 to 1905. But at that time, the bulbs, you had like a 40 watt and a 60 watt, and they weren't as bright as we might be used to today. So Cass Gilbert created the spaces to have as much natural light coming in. And so every chamber, a lot of the side rooms on the 3rd floor, and the big grand staircase skylights were all implemented to bring that natural light into the building.
What are some of the Minnesota Historical Society's plans for tours of the building?
What we've been telling people, it's going to be spectacular to come back here as a citizen or as a school kid or as a teacher bringing their school groups. And you don't necessarily have to have the before and the after knowledge, because just as you walk in the building, I think you'll be amazed. People are already amazed at the architecture and the huge soaring dome and all the beautiful staircases, and now it's just going to be heightened even farther because you have this, important project being completed. And people are anticipating all kinds of these new things to happen or be seen in the building. And our tours will be pretty much the same. We're going to visit the same locations. We'll go to the governor's reception room. We'll go to the House and the Senate, the Supreme Court chambers. When the roof repair is done, we can go back to the quadriga, but that probably won't be until after the building is completely finished this summer. There's a lot to see.
In October, President Obama visited the nation of Laos in Southeast Asia, acknowledging the deadly legacy of what has become known as the CIA's secret war. Next, we'll show you how that long-ago conflict connects to Minnesota and to a new memorial at the Capitol. On a sultry June morning in 2016, marking the more than 4 decades that have passed since the first Hmong refugees arrived in the United States, a memorial to commemorate the U.S. and Alliance Special Forces in Laos was installed on the Minnesota State Capitol grounds. The monument depicts the contributions, sacrifices, and experiences of the Hmong, Lao, and American soldiers, as well as the nurses, advisors, and volunteers who served and fought for freedom in Southeast Asia from 1961 to 1975. The memorial itself is a 10-foot tall bronze depiction of a bamboo sprout.
We came up with the concept of using a bamboo sprout to symbolize the vigorous renewal that the Hmong culture has experienced here in Minnesota, because bamboo was a plant that they used to survive on in the jungles when food sources had all disappeared, and it was their shelter and many other functions for them. So it's an important plant to them, and it also has those qualities of being a vigorous resprouter. If somebody hacks it down, it can come back to life. And that's essentially what happened to them in Laos, is they were almost exterminated, or they were being tried to exterminate them. So they have come back strong and vigorous, full of courage, and that's what we wanted to portray.
The inspiration behind the bas-relief depictions on the statue was the story cloths created by the Hmong women in Thai refugee camps. Known for their fine embroidery skills, Hmong women created tapestries portraying events and stories from Hmong history and culture to earn money. Some of these tapestries depict in great detail the refugees' harrowing war experiences.
My first memory in life was the gush wind hitting my face with blowing sand, to my face. And it's not a natural wind, but it's it's a wind that gather all the sand blowing at you, caused by the helicopter or caused by plane taking off from the clandestine airfield of Longchang. Longchang is the name of that airfield, or landing, or when they're taking people back in the body bags, or when they lift off. So that was my first memory of being at the airfield and sandy wind just blowing in my face.
In the early 1960s, fearing the spread of communism, the CIA began a secret war in the officially neutral Kingdom of Laos, recruiting approximately 46,000 Hmong and Lao men and boys who became known as the SGU, or Special Guerrilla Unit, to help fight the North Vietnamese. By the end of the war, as many as 35,000 Hmong soldiers were killed or missing in action, and more than 120,000 displaced Hmong people began to flee. Senator He describes his own family's escape.
It's always that they will greet each other loudly and so happy and cuddle each other. But that time, the conversation become whisper. They're all happy, but they're all happy because they're together, but all the conversation are whisper, like that. And I said, that's kind of strange, As a kid, 10 years old, that's kind of strange. Finally, this time, all the adults are whispering to each other. And then I saw my dad handing money to all my relatives. I didn't know what that meant, but meaning that we're not going to see each other. So here, trying to make your way across. My father, probably the highest earner, being that he's a military man, so he, divide his money to his relative and trying to make your way across,
The escapes from almost certain genocide from Laos to Thailand were fraught with danger, including the life-threatening crossing of the Mekong River, illustrated in many Hmong story cloths.
So immediately after the war, the communists won, and they were capturing everybody and they could, and they would kill men, kill babies, and capture Americans who were still left there also, and take people into these prison of war camps, and they called them re-education centers. And there they would have to grow vegetables to, facilitate the communists. And some of the tortures involved being tied to poles, being buried up to your neck in sand, being carried into these underground pits where there would be bamboo roof over your head, but you'd be in isolation under the ground.
These are just some of the many stories represented on the 16 panels of the memorial. The 4 tiers on the memorial tell a multitude of stories, each from a different point of view.
When I start looking at the bottom, I see the politics, but then as time goes by, I see the disaster and then the sorrow. Then a couple layers up, I see the hope, the prosperity, the welcomeness of Minnesotan. And I do get a little giggling, it's a little humorous as I go up, as they put a few character, quirky looking Minnesotan with thick coat, and some with mitten, and some with Lutheran pastor look, welcoming, the Hmong as they land at the Minneapolis International Airport. So, and then there's even a snowman next to a church, and that's, that is kind of truly how, it's a small picture, and we can't stereotype that is Minnesota, but in itself, it does show Minnesota. It shows kind of some way the land of the Green Giant, or the Pillsbury Doughboy, or the Ham Spear. When I see the snowman next to the church, so I get that, humorous perspective from that, just that small image, yeah.
The images are powerful and transcend language barriers. For those whose lives were lost and those whose lives were affected by the United States' secret war in Laos, their children, their grandchildren, and all of us have a special place on the St. Paul Capitol grounds in which to learn, reflect, and remember. Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.